Hello and welcome. A warm welcome to the many of you tuning in on this discussion on the great climate quick fix. This is a talk that I've been looking very much forward to, as I guess many of you are, am very excited about the many future technological solutions out there to reverse climate change. Yet at the same time, I do find myself questioning if it's safe and sound to just continue our way of life and continue to emit these 40-some gigatons in yearly emissions. Before we jump straight into it, let's get properly introduced. Katherine, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My name is Katherine Richardson. I'm a professor at the University of Copenhagen and leader of the Sustainability Science Center. And my research field is really something called Earth System Science, which is all about how physics, chemistry, biology, and people, the activities of people together, create the conditions that we enjoy here on Earth. I should also maybe say I led the Danish Climate Commission, which was established by the government to come with a plan to how to become independent of fossil fuels, and I sit on the Climate Council that advises the Danish government on questions of climate.
But on top of all that, you're also an advisory board member of Goodwings.
Oh, yes, and I'm an advisory board member of Goodwings. I thought that was understood.
Well, people probably know that already. A very short introduction to myself. Husband, father of 3, social serial entrepreneur, have studied philosophy and business, and for many funny reasons entered into the world of travel 6 years ago when I co-founded Goodwings.com with the ambition of turning this industry into a force for good. I guess that's enough about us. So thank you so much for being with me today, Katherine. I want to start out by sharing why we've chosen this topic. So technology obviously is a big part of our life. I think COVID has fueled that for more than a year now. Our life and relationships have been digitalized. But at the same time, I think COVID has surprisingly also fueled the attention to the climate crisis. I think maybe this being at home, maybe having more time to reflect on things means that, all government leaders, business leaders, but people in general are talking about climate change and the need to do something about it more than I've ever experienced before. And at the same time, we, awaiting these future technologies, we continue our lives. So one point of view, I don't know if you agree, but for me, it seems like these COVID vaccine breakthroughs have to some way even amplified our belief in ourselves and our capability as humans to develop technologies and solve problems, right? We did it now with the vaccine, only 9 months, and then we started vaccinating the global population. So we can do almost anything, right? We're all on our way to Mars. So this small problem of, loss of biodiversity and temperature increase, can that be solved? Do we have a problem?
We absolutely have a problem, and it absolutely can be solved. And technology is an important part of the solution, but isn't the solution. And let me explain why. Before, it's right. I mean, when we have small problems like COVID, which is a small problem compared to climate change and what it could do to us and with us. When you have small problems, you can often solve them with technology, but we're not going to find a vaccination against climate change. It just isn't going to happen. And when technology in the past has saved us or helped us get over a hump in our development, it's because our development was limited by lack of workforce or by lack of infrastructure. There are 7.8 billion people on this planet now, so workforce isn't a problem. And most places we have more than enough infrastructure. Thank you very much. So what we're missing now, what's challenging our future development is access to resources. And it's not just, getting metals or whatever out of this. It's the size of the garbage dump in the atmosphere we're using for our greenhouse gases, the whole climate discussion. And the problem with technology is it can't It can't make energy. That's the second law of thermodynamics. It can't make biodiversity. It can't make the phosphorus that we need in order to grow our food. So technology can't go in and take the problem away. But technology is a really important tool to use. It just has to be used together with our behavior. And in order to get behavior and technology to play together, we need to actually tweak our economic and our governance systems. And I can give you a really good example just to finish off about why this is. About 15 years ago in the EU, politicians decided that we were impacting climate too much with our private driving in cars. And so we needed a sustainable or a more sustainable technology. We needed cars to drive, be able to go more kilometers per liter. So they set new standards. And then came technology and said, yes, we can do that. And we got some new cars that can drive farther per liter. And then we very cleverly in Denmark reduced the price on cars, which of course meant that we changed our behavior. We bought more cars, we drive more in our cars, and the end result, despite the fact that we have a so-called more sustainable technology or climate-friendly technology, the end result is we're impacting climate far more today with our driving in cars than we were before we had a sustainable technology.
Okay, so there are limits to the ability of technology solving our problem. We also hear about changing consumption patterns, using less, reusing more. Is it viable that we can change that? I mean, can we really?
I think absolutely we can. I think absolutely we can. I was once interviewed by one of these really fancy young guys that drives around in an unbelievable sports car that he'd actually selected because the person he was interviewing after me was Jason Watt. And Jason Watt has somebody that can get him in and out of those cars. And this grandmother was thinking, how the heck are they going to get a crane to get me out of this thing? But, he came in and said, am I going to be in 2050? Will I be able to travel in a nice vehicle like this? I said, yes. And he said, will I be able to have nice clothes? He had a beautiful cashmere sweater on. I said, yes. He said, will I have a nice place to live? Yes. Will I have nice furniture? Yes. He said, well, what's different? What is it about 2050 that everyone's so worked up about? And I said, well, in 2050, you won't throw anything out. All of your furniture will be in modules that can be used for something else, and you won't be driving in something that is giving off CO2 and damaging the climate, and so on. And he was completely, well, then it's all right. If it's only that I just don't have to fill my wastebasket, then heck, I can do that.
So you gave him comfort. Okay, so this also, I think, ties into my world. As a tech entrepreneur, I'm surrounded by people and potential investors talking about growth and preferably exponential growth. And I mean, are we looking into a future where we have a different perception of what growth is? Where hyper growth is maybe replaced with a satisfaction of a steady state, or how do you see this?
No, I see life improve. I mean, who doesn't want the world to be better for their children than for themselves? I see continued improvement, but not necessarily in terms of material consumption. And so if you mean growth as being improved societies and improved lives for people in societies, I think we can hang on to that. If you consider growth as being GDP as we measure it today, I don't think we can hang on to that. But GDP doesn't actually get give a very good picture of the state of people themselves. I mean, think about what happened to GDP in Japan after the tsunami. It soared. I mean, there was wonderful growth. There's lots of money moving around in the system, but that doesn't mean that people were better off than they were before. So I think definitely we need to change the way we define improvement in society, and just the amount of money moving around isn't a very good way of defining it. And this idea of consuming and then throwing away, we have to give up. But that doesn't mean we have to give up on the idea of high living standards and improving living standards. It's also a matter of culture. I like to use the example in biology. If you take, and everybody's done this in school at some point, you take some little bitty organism and you put it in a bottle and you watch it grow. And it starts out growing, you give it some media so it has some nutrients and stuff, and it starts out growing very, very slowly, just like people and population did. And then it's exponential growth, just like people have done. And then as it starts running out of resources, it grows a little more slowly, like the economies in the OECD countries at the moment, by the way. And at the end of the day, the organism dies. It totally collapses because the organism gets poisoned by its own waste products. Think climate, think pollution. And that doesn't happen in ecosystems, because in ecosystems, there are organisms that go in and learn to use the waste of one organism and transform it to something else. And I think we can learn an awful lot from nature about how we can live and continue to improve our living standards without simply consuming and throwing away.
So this change in mindset in growth and also the link to the national economies and GDP, I think if you take that on a personal level, I mean, what we're trying to do in Goodwings is to make people aware of the impact that they have with travel. So by having this carbon calculator on the website, when you book your hotel, you see, oh, this is my total travel footprint from not only the hotel, but also the flight that you might take, or train and transfers, etc. And some of the feedback that we've gotten is that people are really surprised of how much travel accounts for. I believe you probably know this better, but I believe an average Dane emits around 10 tons yearly, I think. And for me to fly to New York on a 2-day business trip is close to 2.5 to 3 tons. So it's quite a lot. So obviously, I think businesses are becoming aware that we can do a lot online, reducing the necessity of pumping out emissions, but also people. I mean, we're not out of COVID yet, and I see that people are now rediscovering Europe. Maybe we don't need to take our 3 kids to the Maldives and emit 25 tons and twice a year. Maybe we could explore more closer to ourselves. So I think there's also solving climate crisis. There's also part of that is also about finding satisfaction in doing things differently and rediscovering what we maybe the old sweater that we threw out, or going to Corsica instead of the Maldives, and basically, but it starts with us becoming aware of our footprint.
But that's, I mean, as you pointed out in the beginning here, I am a member of the advisory group for Goodwings, and it's for a very good reason, because I think actually what you're trying to do there is what I argue as well, and that is that we need a cultural change where we recognize that our real currency in society is the Earth's resources. It's not money, and our ancestors knew that, and they bought and sold from each other with natural capital. And then when they got smarter and said, oh, well, maybe he doesn't need bread today. Maybe we'll give him something that he can buy bread next week if he needs it. And we invented money. And for a very long time, money had a gold standard behind it. It was still linked to the Earth's resources. But then now we've dropped that as well. And we begin to idolize money as if it was a god. But at the end of the day, you can't eat money. You can't build your house with money. And so it is still the Earth's resources that are our real currency, and we don't appreciate that. None of us, we don't treat the resources as currency. None of us would use more money than absolutely necessary to buy a good or a service, but we all use far more resources than are necessary in order to be able to have the lifestyle or life standard that we have. And I think your calculator there, or your dashboard, or whatever you want to call it, that helps people understand just how much that trip costs, not in terms of money, but in terms of our real currency, is a very important step forward. And we should be doing it in many other sectors as well. That doesn't mean I don't think people should fly. You and I can have the same amount of money in the bank, but we probably prioritize how we use it differently. And some people will and need to. I have American family. I fly and will fly, and so I'm going to have to make my cut down on my. Obviously, I try and cut down on travel, but you know, I need to focus on other areas as well to bring my resource fingerprint, or whatever you want to call it, to bring it down. Ecological footprint, I guess it's called, to bring it down.
So talking about this, you know, the available resources and the distribution of resources. In the beginning, you mentioned something about or maybe it was prior to the meeting in our conversation about you know, having a more just distribution of available resources. I think one of the things that have been kind of thought-provoking for me, again, sorry for making this link to COVID, but it's what everybody is talking about these days. I don't want to use the term unjust distribution of vaccines, because I don't want to politicize it, and I appreciate that government's primary responsibility is for their own population, but we have seen at least an uneven distribution of available vaccines. And again, to link it to climate change, I think what is really interesting is a lot of scientists, knowing, you know, a hell of a lot more about COVID than I do, talk about this coming back and biting us in the ass, because we might be fully vaccinated, the US too, but if we continue to let the pandemic rage elsewhere, it's coming back with new mutations. The same goes for climate change. We're kind of solving climate change as a local or national phenomena, but it doesn't really know any borders. So what's your view on this?
Oh, it's absolutely true. And I'm perfectly happy to call the distribution of vaccines in the world unjust. I won't be as politically correct as you are. But what we've forgotten, and I think we have this picture in our mind that ancient or primitive societies lived in harmony with nature. They did not live in harmony with nature. They'd use nature for whatever they could, but they were so close to the negative effects. They could see what they were doing to the world around them, that they had to learn to deal with those effects and to manage their relationship with the world around them. In a globalized economy, we can't see those effects. We can't see the effect of us taking the vaccines and other people not have. We can't see the child in Bangladesh who's making our cheap clothing. We can't see the biodiversity in South America or Southeast Asia that gets removed because we want soybeans for our pigs or palm oil for our food additives. And because we can't see these effects, we are ignoring them. But at the end of the day, they will come back and as you say, kick us in the ass. So we need to focus on these the effects, the far field effects of our local interactions, and that's really hard.
And is it viable that we can create this sense of solidarity? I mean, I'm reading an interesting book, and I'm not reading many books at the moment with 3 kids and Goodwings, you know, full on. But I'm reading a book.
Try listening to books while you're exercising.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's multitasking.
I know. I must be moving towards podcast. But anyway, it's called Humankind. You probably heard about it by Rutger Bregman. And it's interesting because he kind of challenges this notion of survival of the fittest. You know, mankind evolved because, you know, our technological abilities and so on. But his point of view is that we evolved because we were kind to each other. So can we is it viable? Can we aim for a solidaric approach to distributing the world's resources, potentially also vaccines? And
well, first of all, some of us prefer to call it humankind and not mankind. But anyway, I don't believe that we're so altruistic that we will share in that manner. I think it's real. I think we do things when we can see there's something in it for us, and that's what's really interesting. I think at the moment in terms of climate and how we're looking at climate, that for a long time green organizations have been going around saying save the planet. The planet's going to do all right with or without us, with or without climate change. This is about us. So if we can see there's something in it for us, and that can be sharing vaccines or helping other countries tackle climate change or whatever it might be, then I do think it's feasible and it's believable. It could happen. I think there's some really interesting things going on at the moment. Just this week, there have been several law cases that have been won. First of all, you had people a couple of weeks ago. You had a case in Germany where the German government was found guilty of taking away the rights of its younger generation because its climate goals weren't strong enough. Yesterday, you had two in the Netherlands. You had Shell being forced to have a 45% cut by 2030, I think it is, and you also had Exxon lost some of its board members. They were pushed out because of their climate. I mean, suddenly it's like society's waking up and saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't for the sake of the climate, it's for the sake of us. And I think as that, I actually have, I'm still an optimist, even though, I have no numbers, no data that can tell me things are going to be all right. But I have the feeling that, things are changing, and they're changing very, very quickly, because we're realizing this isn't just about saving something else. It's about saving ourselves.
So thank you so much. So this optimism, as you just said, is based on your, you're seeing that things are changing. People are realizing that we need to do things differently. We are in many ways, slowly, but we are moving towards a more circular approach and less linear. Can we reduce the amount of emissions at the pace needed?
Well, we did it. We did it this year. The last year, we've had the decrease that we really needed. But the problem is that we need that much decrease every year from now until 2030 to stay on track in terms of the Paris Agreement. And what's really, I think what's really a really positive outcome of the COVID crisis is the fact that we can see how quickly we really can change our behavior, and you can have a social tipping point in society. Even, we've been hearing for years it simply isn't possible to do anything about climate because it'll be so hard on businesses. It'll, mean people have to change behavior. Boy, we did it from Friday to Monday in connection with COVID. It can be done if we really think it's important. And as I said earlier, the COVID crisis is nothing compared to what the climate crisis can do for us.
So it is not an illusion. We can actually solve the climate crisis, not as a quick fix, but it is doable.
Of course we can. Of course we can. I mean, I can't imagine that humanity would be so stupid as to not use the knowledge we have now. When we understand what we're doing, we also have the power to undo it. Of course we can. And we have most of the technologies already.
And could you share with us what are the technologies that you kind of value as the most important ones in terms of having a sizable impact?
Well, obviously, energy, and that's energy in all forms, and including transport. And I will give you that air transport is still a major challenge, because we don't have anything that is readily. We do have the technologies, but they're not folded, they're not upscaled, and they're not financially feasible at the moment. But the technologies are actually there. So it's energy, all our energy use, which is heat, electricity, and transport. And then it's our food production. That's where we really need to move. And we have the technologies for energy and electricity. That's pretty, for heat and electricity. That's pretty good. We're getting there in terms of the transport. We still have a major challenge in terms of food production. But look how quickly things moved in energy. They can also move in the food system if we really want them to.
Wait for these technologies, especially in transportation. I guess you're talking about electric airplanes or hydrogen-fueled airplanes and power to X and all this. While we are waiting for these technologies, we're here at Goodwings to help remove the emissions that cannot be avoided. So if you're not familiar with us, check us out on goodwings.com, or reach out to me or anyone in my team on LinkedIn. We're always happy to engage in talks. Katherine, so much for taking the time to talk with me, and the many visitors that we have watching this. It was live streamed on LinkedIn, but also with the help from our friends at We Don't Have Time, it really was amplified into the world. So hope you watching have some of Katherine's optimism has rubbed off on you. Hope you also take responsibility for the emissions that you do have and the ones that you feel you cannot avoid. And take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.